it's worrying to me, some of the trends that are emerging in the world today, whether it's, life on social media, Instagrammers who, put elaborate, meals in an Instagram picture. It looks beautiful. And then you get a lot of people attempting to make their own raw meals, and they follow that, and their pets just diarrhea all over the place, or, or are fed inappropriately, or even in some cases can kill their pets.
Yeah.
That's very worrying for me. I see a lot of worrying trends that BomBom has to go against. But for me, this is life, and this is my life mission.
Hi, my name is Kai Chan, a financial consultant, creator, and your host of the Creative Heart Show. In today's episode, I chat with Jason Wang, founder of BomBom, which is a pet nutrition company that individualizes fresh meals for the furry little ones. We talked about the importance of having an inquisitive mind, finding your life's true calling that's beyond dollars, and the story of his man's best friend, Kyubi, the Shiba Inu. Pet lovers out there, this is for you. Enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode 4 of the Creative Heart Show. Today we have a very special guest whom I, through my good friends Dorothy and Vincent, who are also behind the camera today, got to know. His name is Jason Wang.
Yes.
From BomBom. BomBom is a fresh meals, like pet nutrition, individualized for pets.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Company. We'll let him talk a bit more later on, but yeah, I'm very excited to talk to him because primarily, if you guys, those of our friends who already know, Fiona and I are very, very into Shiba Ing, and he is the Dogfather.
Oh God!
Proud father of 2 Shiba Inus. They are Kyubi and Hanako. Very excited to actually meet them someday.
Yeah, for sure. You'll definitely get the chance.
Yes. BomBom. So like pet nutrition company, that means fresh meals individual for pets.
That's right.
The way I imagine it is like a meal prep for, instead of athletes, it's for pets. Am I correct? Something like that.
Yeah, I would say so. But I think for pets, it requires a greater degree of calculation.
Okay.
The reason is because humans are omnivores, so actually we can be slightly more forgiving in what we intake, or ingest. Whereas for pets, actually, because they're less evolved and they actually have more specific requirements,
mm-hmm.
It is very important to balance it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, if let's say us as the owner, we see the dog is having diarrhea,
yeah.
or like loose poo, or is not pooing properly,
yeah.
Or is even being fussy and not eating the food, the pet is not going to have the chance to get the right nutrition,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's also a lot about educating owners. That's why we would term ourselves a pet nutrition company rather than just a meal prep company, because part of what we do is education.
I see.
And also changing the way that people perceive pet food, right? Pet food shouldn't be something that is in a biscuit form, eaten day in, day out for the rest of their lives. It should be, covering a whole range of nutrition, not just, something that's homogeneous and processed.
That's something that I want you to go very deep in. That's, I think, the second part of the podcast later on.
Okay.
But first and foremost, right, because what I'm actually trying to do here at the Creative Heart, at least for this podcast, is that there are basically 2 main parts of the question bubble that I'm actually trying to pop. Mm-hmm. The first part being, because I feel that, essentially at the Creative Heart, what I'm trying to figure out, along with the audience, is what it means to live a fulfilling life and what it takes to actually live a fulfilling life doing basically what you love to do.
Yeah.
So, and I think to have a very solid context on this, right, because of your vast experience in the finance space previously, right? I think that will actually be a very key, perspective that you can actually offer to us, in possibly like a piece of a valuable puzzle for the audience to take away from. So, I just want you to take us back to the years before the founding of BomBom.
How far back do you want to go? I have many years. Well, I have a lot of dark past. No, I'm just joking. So I think, I'm pretty unconventional in the way that even I entered finance.
Yes.
Because I graduated during the time of the dot-com bubble burst.
Okay.
obviously, even if you had wanted to become a banker during that period,
Yes.
it was very difficult to find jobs. Banks everywhere were shedding tens of thousands of jobs around the world. So I think like everyone else, from the time they were young to, even to their 40s or middle age, people are trying to find out what it is that they really, really love to do. And if I rewind back, this is why I said I have a really, really long past in asking myself this question. I remember when I was really young, like maybe, in my early teens, I would follow my mum to the stock market in KL.
Okay.
And she would go there, sit with her Remisia, buy stocks and shares, and I'd see these flashing boards of, share prices, they're going up and down prices, and there's people betting like a casino on, whether things were going up or down. And I asked my mum at that time, Mum, how do you decide what to buy and what to sell?
Yeah.
And I was expecting this epiphany or this enlightenment from her, and she simply said to me, if it goes up, you buy it. If it goes down, you sell it first. So that didn't really help, and I was left scratching my head for the longest time. And I think some of the turning points in life can be triggered by the simplest queries in your mind, right? Or the simplest thirst for knowledge. And believe it or not, how I got into finance, or what really triggered me to want to find out more, was trying to understand what my mom said. Like, what makes a share go up? What is a share? And why are people buying up, things up and down in a frenzy? And, I used to help her collect the little invoices that she had, before the days of computerized and electronic trading. And, we count up, the P&Ls that she would make or lose. And I just found that terribly fascinating, and I wanted to find out more about, what made things tick. And I think this is huge relevance to how I came to BomBom today. Because I think in whatever you do in life, you have to find out what makes something tick.
Yes.
Right? So rewinding back in those days, how I got into finance was...
Were you sorry to interrupt. Were you as a child someone who's inquisitive in nature in that sense? That you always try to figure out...
Probably one of those annoying kids that are always like, why this, why that? I'd love to take things apart, put it back together. But I wasn't one of these, very gregarious kids, or, I like to hang out in big groups. I was a bit more of a loner. So I was more introspective, and I think, and my childhood formed very much the basis of what I am today. Except that when you grow up, you lose yourself very much in, the whole prospect of getting good grades, making good money, making sure that you go to the right institutions for education, for employment. You lose yourself in all of that. And when I was a kid, I always remembered when people asked me, what is it I wanted to do? And this is when you're in primary school and, you just learn how to talk. I said, I want to be a marine biologist. And I was fascinated with the sea. I was fascinated with animals. I grew up with 12 dogs, right? And in KL. And every day I came home, the first thing I would do is I would greet my dogs. My dogs would greet me, and I would love, playing with them, trying to trying to communicate with them, trying to understand what goes through their mind, what makes them tick.
Do you have a big family?
Well, we lived, yes. I mean, we lived with my dad's side of the family, not divorced, but, my mum moved from Singapore to Malaysia. And we lived there.
A lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Well, in Malaysia, there's a lot of land, right? Land is cheap. So we had a lot of dogs. We had Jack Russells. We had German Shepherds. We had mongrels. A whole range. So, they really had the full run of the house. They had a big garden to run around in. And I'll tell you a little interesting story later about, the challenges of starting BomBom, and how, if you're honest with yourself from the beginning about what you want to do in life, you'll get there faster. You will succeed faster, I feel. But it is along the path of life that, because there's so many forces pulling you back and forth, like, practical considerations, like I said, money and just to make a living, you kind of have to make little sacrifices in order to just get by on a daily basis.
I see. But I don't think you just got by. You had a very reputable career in finance.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people didn't know that I wasn't, one of these brainy academic students. Yes, okay. I wasn't a terribly studious person.
Okay.
But I was always a person that learned by doing on the job. And when I graduated from university, I found it extremely hard to get a first job. I must have applied to at least 200 companies. And out of 200 applications, I maybe only got accepted for 5. I came from, a good university. I was from the London School of Economics.
Yeah.
My grades were very average, but, I had a lot of internship experience, on-the-job experience. That's me. I'm more of a doer rather than exam-based.
Right.
And having said that, in my school life, earlier school life, primary and secondary, I was very science-based.
Oh.
So already I was starting to lose my way. Okay. And that's my point. From childhood, I always said I wanted to be a marine biologist. I loved animals. I grew up trying to understand dogs, and I thought that I understood them better than other people.
Okay.
And along the way, I kind of got diverted trying to find out about finance. But I felt that if I had actually stuck to a science-based degree, because I had actually been a very good chemistry student. I think I scored one of the highest scores in the country for genetics and biochemistry.
Wow.
So I really knew that I had a leaning towards that area of science.
Right.
But I never thought that I could make a living from something like that.
I see.
When I graduated, or when I was going through secondary school even, there's no one to tell you definitively, chase your dreams, etc. And you don't have to worry about money. Money will come later. There was no like, Steve Jobs at that time.
I think that makes sense, because like growing up from Malaysia, our generation, or the 1 or 2 generations like around our circle, most of our parents would like, I don't know, maybe as for my parents, they always tell me that look for something that you kind of there's actually job opportunities,
That's right. Yeah.
Perspectives, that kind of thing down the road.
So
was it something that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, we always joke, Chinese kids and whatnot, the parents want you to work for a big prestigious institution or a big bank, bragging rights for the parents.
Yeah.
And, they're always comparing you. I had 2 elder siblings, both of them were scholars, they're extremely clever people. And, that pressure to be compared was always there.
Right.
And you always wanted to prove to your parents that, you're capable.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that sort of pressure diluted down your own, or my own, desires, and after a while you kind of lose yourself and you kind of convince yourself this is the path I want to take.
I see.
And when I graduated, actually, I found it very hard to get a job in finance.
Okay.
Because I wasn't a first-class student, because I wasn't
in
from
London,
Oxford or Cambridge. In London.
Okay.
Right. I was focusing on the London market.
Okay.
So actually, during that time, I did part-time jobs just to get by. I even did a secretarial job just to get by while I was applying for jobs.
This was in which year?
Around 2000.
2000.
Yeah. So I actually, being very proud, and I didn't want to be dependent on my parents, I took up part-time jobs, even as a secretary, or even like just doing admin work, being paid by the hour for, doing odd jobs here and there.
Yes.
And I never gave up on that dream of wanting to be a trader, a financial trader, of trying to find out why those prices went up and down. So I carried a lot of that through in my career, and I was very focused all the time on what I wanted to learn, right? So, and I think that's the important thing, that in whatever job I did, I took away something that could be taken to the next job. And even though, fast forwarding, the leap from finance to pet nutrition sounds huge.
Yes.
Actually, there's a lot of parallels, which I will discuss later.
Yes.
In what I brought forward from those skill sets into this pioneering area.
Cool.
In the area of pet nutrition, there's really nothing like what we do.
Yes.
In the way that we construct diets, the way we think about diets. but I think it sometimes requires a fresh perspective and someone brave enough to stick their head out and say, this is what needs to be done. But I'll come to that later. I think going back to the time I graduated, I took a very roundabout route. I was in semiconductors for a while. I just had to make ends meet.
Okay.
So I could look at a microchip and look at the part number and tell you exactly what that part does, etc. And it was such a roundabout route. But eventually I got into an asset management company, and that's when my research career started. In researching companies that did biochemicals, in pharmaceuticals, in commodities, in all the hard industries, we call it. The
And
bricks
this was
and mortar.
during a point of time when you were still in London?
Yeah, so I spent close to 20 years in London, schooling, working, and finally I moved back to Singapore, I think it was 2007, just before the crisis. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, it was just before the 07-08 crisis.
08, yeah.
And then you got into finance during that point of time.
No, I was in finance from
before
2003. Actually, I was already working for an asset management company. So while I was in university, I was already doing a part-time job with an asset management firm, quite a large asset management firm.
Yeah.
So while I was in university, I was already working. Like I said, I'm always better at doing rather than exam-based, and I always found that more valuable in life. And especially in the area of finance, there is no exam or degree or course that can teach you how to trade, or that can teach you how to look at a company and decide whether it's worth buying or worth selling. You just have to get stuck into a job and ask a lot of tough questions. And I think that formed very much the basis of who I am today, that you should never just take things as gospel.
I see.
And in the area of pet nutrition, there's a lot of literature out there, but a lot of that literature is on the net, is written by amateurs or people who are just speaking from self-experience, but there's no real substance behind what they're saying. And I think having the ability to challenge those conventional wisdom is really an uphill struggle at times. You need to have the academic backing yourself in order to challenge those traditional ideas.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think that's the key in everything you do, whether you're entering a new industry or not. Like, for example, when I was in semiconductors, it has nothing to do with finance, has nothing to do with pet nutrition. From that, I learned, team working, I learned how to use Excel, and I learned how to, relationship management, and I was very young, I was just out of university at that time. And, when I started off working in asset management and research, it taught me how to deep dive, ask questions behind the questions and making judgments or decisions. And learning that everything that we read or do is extremely fallible. You could be the smartest guy in finance, you could have the best theories out there, and you can still lose money. So I think it kept me very grounded. In a way, in finance, you work with some really some brilliant minds. You work with, very successful people, and you work with very misinformed people. And because the industry is so heterogeneous, you really have to differentiate yourself in a way, but also you have to cut through the smoke.
Right.
And I think that's another thing that I was taught, that you have to be able to differentiate what is true and what is rubbish out there. That's a really valuable skill set. And I feel that a lot of people nowadays, they take things as gospel. Just because it's in a textbook means it's true. And life is really not like that. And I would say that 10% of what I learned in university isn't even applied in my daily work today. So it's entirely feasible that someone like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, dropouts from university, can change the world in a very, very big way and not complete university.
Makes a lot of sense. But I just want to actually ask you, like, this part of the personality of yours, do you realize it from very, very young, like in secondary school?
No.
Or do you think, looking back, you were being put in a position whereby such quality is like was encouraged, and that's why you realized it?
No, actually, on the contrary, I felt that was an uphill struggle the whole way. So it wasn't until I graduated, and you expect that when you graduate, fine, you're gonna get a job, and things are gonna really go your way in life. But there is nothing. You graduate, you get your degree, and then you have to find a job. Then life really starts. I always had this romantic view is that your parents are always gearing you up to like go to the best school, get the best grades, and then when you get it, it sorts you for life. But then when you get there, it's like, oh, another new battle begins. So I think one of the turning points for me, I talked to career people. I was constantly asking people, do you like your job? What does it involve on a day-to-day basis? I just wanted to find out more
answers.
But what was the most poignant thing that I ever heard in my life was after I graduated, and I wasn't entirely satisfied with my performance, or I didn't feel that I learned really what I wanted to in life.
I see.
And even after completing an economics degree, I still didn't fully understand capital market theory in terms of what makes price go up and down. But after I graduated, my dad just simply said to me, Jason, the world is your oyster. And I sat there and I was like, holy shit, he's right. I don't have to do economics. I don't have to do banking or whatever.
You don't have to limit yourself.
I don't have to limit myself, and I will always remember that. So I think, you only apply very little of what you learn at university. I understood that university is more of a way of life. It's more of a discipline rather than the content that you actually learn, right? Real life is highly logical. It can't be put down to theory. As they say in finance, markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay liquid. In other words, you can have the best thought out theory, it can make perfect mathematical sense, but because markets are dictated by human beings who are emotional, irrational, illogical, prices can move against you.
There are a lot of variables.
Yeah, and it's up to you whether you want to lean against that illogical price move or if you want to just cut loss. And that determines whether you're going to be a good trader or a bad trader. So yeah, somehow in my journey, I did finally answer my own question, like what makes prices go up and down.
Right. And that journey actually culminated in you founding one of the...
It was not an immediate epiphany. It was something very gradual. And coming back to your question, do I think that this quality was something I realized early on? No, it wasn't. It was a very painful, soul-searching, uphill struggle for me to find out who I really was, what I loved doing. Now, obviously, every path will be different for everyone. I was always geared on, being the best trader in the world. I wanted to, be an investment specialist.
And you did just that.
I don't think anyone could say that they're an investment specialist. Right. I really don't think so. Even someone like George Soros or some of the most reputed traders in the world, we are nervous every day. The world changes every day. The way that markets move changes every day. Everyone makes losses, right? And as we say in trading, as long as you're winning more than 50% of the time, which sounds like an awful ratio, but if you're winning more than 50% of the time, you'll make money. But the thing is, for the times that you're losing money, you just have to make sure your losses are smaller than your gains.
That makes sense.
Right? So it was a very humbling experience. I thought that, I was maybe a reasonably educated person, an academic to some degree. But when you come into finance, you meet really, really brilliant people. You are extremely humbled. And when you put your own theories and hard work behind investing and you still get it wrong, it's extremely humbling. And I think that quality feeds through into, where pet nutrition is today. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the pet nutrition market.
Right.
A lot of unquestioned traditions that people don't realize they're actually hurting their pets when they're doing something.
So this is the part where I want to start going into BomBom, because the whole time I was actually researching about Jason, I was trying to connect the pieces. Like, he had such a reputable career, founding one of the asset management company, and then went on to be a CEO of an investment company based in Singapore. How that part of his story made sense to leading up to the founding of BomBom. and then you were talking about the experiences that humbling experiences that you actually got from the finance space. That I think there is a very interesting story there that I think would be very valuable. I would like to actually know at this point in time, other than these experiences, can you dive in a little bit in terms of what actually do you think was the biggest lesson or like contributed to your path of like leading up to the founding of BomBom?
I think there's a lot of luck involved. Life, the destination you get in life, is made up of the journey that you take. And I know that sounds very cliche, but obviously there's a lot of luck involved in that. And there is, you have to be brutally honest with yourself.
Right.
So even though it sounds like, it's glorious being the CEO of a company and whatnot, actually you're not. You're probably the lowest rung. You're running around worrying about everything, making sure that everything is in place, and it's very stressful, right? I lost a lot of hair during those years.
And you grew back a lot.
I still have some. I don't know if it grew back, but it's extremely stressful. Yeah, there's a lot of firefighting. People think having your own company and starting something up and you have this fancy title, it's glorious, but it's not. You're constantly worrying about the survivability of that company. It's like a kid. You have to worry that it's well fed, it's well watered, and there are just so many things that can go wrong with a company. Management can fall out, you can have bad employees, you can have fraud, you can run out of money, you can lose money, you can just have people who don't believe in your business, and eventually it's a downward spiral. There are just so many ways that you can fail. And the trouble is with social media nowadays and how the internet has made the world a small place is that we only read about huge success stories. And I actually want to highlight that there are a lot of failure stories too. You always hear about the unicorns that made it big and etc. And for every one unicorn, there's probably about 1,000 failures out there.
Yes.
Who got beaten out by that unicorn. You never hear their story. And so for all the people out there who want to be an entrepreneur and they think that they got this bright idea, I would say that life has a way of punishing you if you aren't your own harshest critic. And I've always been harsh with myself. I think even my own family would agree that I can sometimes be perceived to be stubborn, etc. But when things go wrong, I am my own harshest critic.
Okay.
I don't wait for someone to tell me that I did something wrong. And I think that introspective nature from when I was young has been a reasonably useful quality in correcting myself when things go wrong, or whether it's in your past relationships or your past jobs. You didn't do well in something, you always need to have that kind of self-questioning mind.
Right.
Now, how I got into BomBom, like I said, it's luck as well. I believe that if Kyubi never came into my life, my first Shiba, I never would have known that of all the things that were going wrong in the industry.
Right, so when you had Kyubi, you were still, a CEO in the previous company.
Yes, I was. Okay. Yeah, that's right. So I think my view was that I wanted to take a step out of finance anyway. I was getting to the point where I felt that I wanted to do something that I was more passionate about. So it kind of fell into place, which is why I say I felt very lucky. But at the same time, I had no plan to leave finance. I always felt that I was going to be involved in finance in some way or another.
Right.
But when Kyubi came into my life, I remember that I went to that breeder's house and I saw this little pup, and I never intended to get a pup that day. And I said to my wife, I said, you know what, we're not going to buy a pup today. Okay, we're not going to make an impulse decision, right? And of course, when you see these little pups running around and they give you that look,
turned out it became an impulse decision.
It's game over, right? It's GG. So, but having said that, there were a few pups running around, and they didn't do anything for me, and they were pups, and I managed to steel myself to say, okay, not going to take one back today.
Right.
And then there was one little guy who was just playing by himself. It must have been me relating to him, being introspective and a loner, and I picked him up. And I looked at him, and he just looked at me, and normally when you pick puppies up, they're just squirming, they want to get out of your grasp. He just calmly looked at me, and I looked at him, and I just said, oh God,
There's no turning back.
no, it's game over.
No
And
turning back now.
I just said to him, I found myself just saying to him, I'm going to look after you for the rest of your life.
But you and your wife had some plans years before that you guys were going to have a dog someday.
Well, we never did because we just didn't think that we could handle it.
Okay.
Right.
Because of your busy career and all that.
Yeah. And I promised myself, because I had a cat when I was in London.
Okay.
And when that cat passed away, I was destroyed. You know, I was devastated. And it was just before I moved back to Singapore. And I'd made a promise to myself that if I ever got a pet, I am going to make sure that I'm going to be there for 60% of its time.
Okay.
You know, I don't think it's fair to get a pet and for it to be stuck at home all day, and you know, it revolves its life around you.
Right.
And it's just waiting there for you, and that's how they spend, you know, a lot of their lives. So I knew that if I was to get a pet, I had to commit the time. And when I first got Kyubi, I was already, you know, looking at, you know, taking a step back from my business, and I had really put it up for sale. So fortuitously, I actually sold that business, and we got, you know, some good cash for it.
Yeah.
But it meant that I could spend a lot of time with Kyubi, and I could watch his every move. I could watch him growing up. You know, I'm very hands-on.
Was this the part where you mentioned that you were being your harshest critic? Like, what's gonna be the next thing?
No, I had no idea that at that stage, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I had worked pretty hard in finance for the last 20-ish years, and I just needed to take a break. You know, markets were not getting easy, and I felt that my time was better spent on working on my health and, you know, just, you know, family life rather than just going out there and making money.
Any influences from the past, like maybe you were going through a stage where you realized that, hey, you wanted to actually go back to your roots in like marine biology, you know, with like biology stuff, and the fact that your dad actually gave you that advice before being an oyster?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually, at that time, you know, I always wanted a pet, first of all, but I didn't think that pet was going to start my career again. What my goal was, so while I was in finance, I always had an end goal. So I had already answered my question, like why share prices moved up and down.
Yeah.
But of course, during your life's journey, you also ask yourself, where do you see yourself in 20 years' time, 30 years' time? What's the end game? My end game, and a lot of my own friends didn't even know this about me, right? They just thought I'm the finance guy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who didn't know me since I was young never knew I was such a huge pet lover. And my end game was, I always said to myself, when I earn enough money in finance, I want to make sure that there are no homeless dogs, cats, animals on the street. No animal deserves to be, you know, run over by a car, or, you know, be, you know, left scavenging for rubbish, or to be beaten and left out in the sun or in the cold weather or whatever, and just been given that quality of life. So my end goal was to earn enough money to help these animals. But like the Dalai Lama says, man is very funny, right? We spend all our lives trying to be happy and healthy, and we end up destroying much of that happiness and healthiness, that health, by going out there and chasing money so that to try and be happy and healthy at the end.
Right.
And what Kyubi taught me was that I didn't have to wait until I had a huge stack of money in order to help animals, right? I would say that if I wanted to retire, yeah, maybe I could, but you know, it wasn't the huge, you know, stockpile of cash that I had envisioned or wanted. I felt that I had still had things to do, you know, or things to prove to myself financially. But when Kyubi came along, that's why I said it's kind of luck. Well, it's not really luck, it was bad luck, because you know, the poor guy was not in good health, you know, within weeks of him coming home. And that's what opened my eyes to that something needed to be done.
So for context, maybe you could just share a little bit of what Kyubi actually went through for the listeners out there during his pup years.
Yeah. Well, Kyubi came from, you know, very good bloodline. His father is a championship show dog from Japan, and he's deemed to be one of the better Shiba Inus in Singapore. When I say better, he's pedigree, top of the breed. He's a good-looking chap, right? And when I saw Kyubi, I thought, oh, he's going to grow up to be a good-looking chap too. Okay. Within weeks of him coming home, he started to develop a small little hot spot, and he scratched himself. And you don't really think much when a dog scratches themselves, right? I mean, they do it all the time. And even though I had many dogs when I was young, this was my first dog, right? All the others were like family dogs where I interacted with them a lot, but I didn't bathe them, I didn't feed them. And QB came home, he was 6+ weeks old, and he would sleep in my bedroom. I would take him for his 2-hour toilet breaks, like you would when you have a baby, and toilet train them, and you molly call him, he slept on my bed, he did everything the same, and you just interact him all day long. So for just a note, for any animal lover who says, I love animals, I'm gonna get a dog, people would think that I would say, yeah, go for it, it's great. But I actually say, don't do it unless you can commit the time, because otherwise you're gonna run into behavioral issues or health issues for the dog or cat, if you don't spend the time with your pet, looking for those warning signs. Yeah. But anyway, so he came home and he started with a little hot spot, he started scratching, and I asked the breeder, is this normal? And he said, yeah, I think he's shedding, he's shedding his undercoat or puppy coat, and he's itching. And to my horror, he went from having this tiny little pin-sized hot spot. Yes. And he started balding on his entire side of his body. He had no fur. And he started developing ringworm, on his side as well. So these crusty little halos started appearing on his side. And it was very distressing because during that time,
visible to the naked eye?
Absolutely, it was huge. So if you go to BomBom's website, we show the origin story there, and you can see how it deteriorated very rapidly. And during that time, of course, we weren't just sitting back and doing nothing. We took him to 3 vets. And you see the traditional response by vets, when you ask them that, they said, okay, we're going to do a skin scrape test or fur pluck test. We're going to test for fungus and bacteria, etc. And most of it came back negative, right? And even before the test came back, they said, in the meantime, take some steroidal cream, some antihistamine, some antibiotics, and hopefully he'll clear out from that. He went from this beautiful little furry pup, who looked like he had the promise of being a champion Shiba Inu, to this skinny, half-balding, single-coated, really runtish looking pup. And you never think that, the first thing you think of is, this is genetics, I got the runt of the litter. Right. When I compared him to his siblings, he was smaller, he was skinnier, and the first thing you think of is genetics. But you would never think that, you provide, this dog in a comfortable home environment, he's clean all the time, and, he's well fed. Right. You'd never think that actually you are the one doing all these things to your dog, and it's harming him. And when I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, when the vet started to fail, the meds were making him weaker. I could see that it really wasn't doing him any favors. He was becoming very emaciated. And the funny thing is, being an analytical person, I was fascinated with, how he grew up. So I used to chart his weight, I used to chart his size growth and his output, his input, what he'd eat. And this is before I knew much about, dog canine nutrition specifically, right? But out of this pursuit of science, I charted all of this. So till this day, I have a calendar that we used to mark QB's pee and poo times. Wow. And every day since he came home, I religiously, asked, my family to take note, and, my housekeeper to take note. And QB used to poo anywhere between 4 to 6 times a day. Now, if you read up on a website...
That's a lot, right?
That's a lot. But you see, no one thinks that's abnormal. Okay. Because when you go to a website, everyone says, oh, they're puppies, they're poop machines. That's normal, right? But to me, that wasn't normal. And that was the beginning of the self-questioning phase. Right. Like, what if it's me? What if I'm doing something wrong? So at the time, I was feeding him what they called the 6-star kibble. It was organic kibble. It was full of good ingredients. I would go into a pet shop and look at and pour through the ingredients and say, okay, that's good, that's bad, this is good, this is bad. And I found a kibble brand that I felt that I was very comfortable with, and it was deemed to be the best in the pet food industry.
Right.
And then I started to ask myself, is it normal for a dog to poo 4 to 6 times a day, and for the poo to be such huge in volume, but it's never fully firm? So that began my quest to answer the question about what if he's trying to tell me something through his poo, right? And then I started to just apply simple logic. If I'm feeding my dog 100 grams of food, and he's pooing out the equivalent of 80 to 90 grams, what is he absorbing? And then that led to a whole host of other questions, like what if he's allergic? What if he's intolerant? What if this is not the right food for him? But there's no one to answer all these questions. Like, you can spend hours and hours and days on the internet or picking up nutrition textbooks, and there's nothing that tells you. At the time when IQB started, there was very little literature about, all this. And then, I stumbled on some raw feeding, ideas, and there were people out there, and typically it would be people who lived in the big countryside, who had access to fresh produce on a farm or close by. And then, even though it looked very gross to me, the whole idea of feeding raw, I asked myself, is it normal that everything that a dog requires is in that little biscuit of kibble, right? And there's these other people feeding like pieces of meat and veg and fruit and all that. And you see, everything out there makes you paranoid that if you go and formulate it yourself, you're going to imbalance the diet, because we all think that it's so difficult to balance a diet. But you see, if you are consistent with your logic, we never worry as human beings if we are receiving a balanced diet. And the truth of it is, we never get a balanced diet. I mean, it's very difficult, but we somehow convinced ourselves we can do it well. But then when it comes to our own dogs or cats, we become super paranoid that we know nothing about them, and we rely on the words of pet food suppliers and manufacturers that everything that they need is in that processed patty or kibble. But when you start to dissect, you go back to basics. So back to my research days, you don't take if I'm looking at investing in a company, I don't take the management's word for the prospect or outlook for that company is looking good.
Right.
I would ask them about numbers, and if the numbers don't add up for me, it would be a short on the company. And if it looked like they were being ultra conservative and things were looking rosy, I'd buy the company. And instead of looking at more reviews for pet food, instead of taking people's word for it, I had to go back to basics and the root of what was wrong. So it was the start of another very soul-searching period for me, where there was no guidance, there was no one that I could lean on. Feeding
this was
raw.
2016, right?
Yeah, 2016.
And you already sold your previous company? Or you on
I was still there. How
did you manage the time to do all the research?
Well, I think, when you're part of the sales process, when I was taking a step back already, I could ironically afford more time.
Okay.
So I spent days and nights actually reading up on, instead of reading up forums and reviews. And I think forums, just putting it out there, forums, while it's great to, collaborate amongst other pet owners and, discuss other problems that everyone has had, common problems, it's also a really dangerous breeding ground for misinformation too. Because no one there is really an expert, and everyone's just talking from the point of view of their own experiences, right? It doesn't mean that it's right. And you get a lot of perpetuation of old wives' tales and, things that don't make sense. Assumptions, correct, yeah. So I had to go back to basics. Instead of going to these kind of things, I had to take a step further away from pet nutrition in order to understand more about pet nutrition. So I picked up books on canine anatomy, feline anatomy. If you have to understand what works for your pet, you have to understand what is your pet made of first. And, I hit on some really interesting research, just understanding first that, their gut looks nothing like ours. Their teeth look nothing like ours, right? Yet the people who cooked, home cooked food for their pets, and you see them putting lovely vegetables and fruit in there, sometimes you see people feeding their dogs and cats like human beings. It could be a human meal. And it was puzzling to me because every textbook out there that wasn't talking about nutrition but was objectively talking about, this is how a dog's intestine looks like, this is what the enzyme set of an animal looks like. Everything was contradicting what pet food companies were saying or what ingredients were going in.
Yeah.
So for example, every canine textbook out there will tell you where amylase is produced. Amylase is the enzyme that is required to break down carbohydrates or starches, in human beings, in animals. Human beings have 20,000 plus copies of the amylase gene, whereas dogs only have 20 at best. Actually, a lot of domesticated dogs only have about 6 copies. But if they were pariah dogs or dogs that were forced to scavenge, they can adapt to a small degree, and they will have they will adapt to produce slightly more amylase to scavenge and absorb nutrition from secondary sources like starches. So that really went counter to what I believed. And if you look at the packet of any kibble pack, or even some bath packs or some freeze-dried packs, kibble would have at least 20, 30, 40% carbohydrate content. And I'm wondering, if your dog is so deficient in amylase that breaks down carbohydrates, why are we feeding our dogs so much carbohydrates? And what's the impact of doing that? And then you drill down and you understand that, if you strain the pancreas that's producing amylase, you're going to end up with pancreatitis. And pancreatitis is a terribly debilitating affliction for dogs and cats to have. It's a very painful way to go. So the first step in evolving his diet, Kyubi's diet, was to take out all the starch. And you see a lot of vets and you see a lot of so-called experts in the industry, they advise feeding pumpkin, rice, to your dogs, or even they will say, oh, white rice is bad, but brown rice is better. So they go from high glycemic to low glycemic recommendations. And
so
both are equally bad. There's still carbs at the end of the day. It just depends how quickly that carbohydrate, whether it's complex or simple starch, breaks down. But at the end of the day, the simple building blocks are still simple starches or sugars, which still needs amylase to metabolize. So it doesn't really matter whether it's brown rice or white rice, or if it's potatoes or sweet potato or pumpkin. It's still, the food group is still a starch. So the first thing I did was I eliminated carbohydrates from the diet. And the miraculous thing is, I started to see his poo frequency reduce from 4 to 6 times a day to twice a day. So I was like, oh, he's absorbing the food much better. Then while I was preparing his food, I started to experiment, and I'm a huge foodie myself, so I do a lot of cooking at home. So I'm a huge proponent of not overcooking stuff or frying things till it looks like a burnt piece of coal. And I know that
the nutrients.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So being the obsessive person that I am, I started sous videing his food.
Wow.
So I had sous vide containers and whatnot, and I would get a nice piece of chicken or pork, and put a little bit of veg in there. And then you read that lentils are good forms of protein and ALA and whatnot. So I started putting little bits of veg and predominantly meat in his sous vide packs, and I sous vide it, and then I fed it to him, and he would, he used to eat like he wasn't fed for weeks. When he was on kibble, it's just like he was never ever full. But when I fed him proper fresh meats, fresh produce, after every meal he used to let out a contented burp, and then he used to wander away. And it's a nice little feeling to see them, so happy and contented. And worst of all, you see that through your own formulation, you're not giving them diarrhea. And they're growing up well, and he was bulking up, and his fur was growing back from his bald spots. And I'm like, wow, this is not so scary after all. It's not so difficult. But I still wasn't, being the insecure person that I am, I was never content with, I'm doing things right. So then I started to ask myself more questions. What if I'm still doing him harm? Right? What if I am still not balancing the diet properly?
Because it's almost like a one shot, one kill attempt?
Well, I think it's always
too good to be true kind of.
Yeah, so like one of my bosses, he's a very famous guy in finance, and I took away something from that job when I was working for a very big hedge fund in London. He told me, and I would attribute a lot of my success to him. He told me, Jason, you never stop repainting that bridge. So what he meant by that was, we would build a financial model for a company, and we think that we know that company, and just when you start to get comfortable with things, you start to create more complex models and start to rebuild that model and start to, make it emulate real life variables a lot more, and just try to be clever about the way you do things. You should never rest on your laurels and say, I know everything. So when you ask me if I'm an investment specialist, I would say no. And even in pet nutrition, I would not call myself an expert. I don't think people should dare to call themselves experts, because especially unlike the area of human nutrition, where there's a lot of literature out there, there's a lot of academic papers printed about human nutrition, and there's a lot that can be understood about human nutrition through objective peer-reviewed research. In the area of canine or feline nutrition, there isn't a lot. So and even some of the research out there is paid research by pet food companies who would not have, neutral opinions printed. So there's a lot of fear-mongering out there. So that's what made my research experience such an uphill struggle, that you read a lot of scaremongering or fear-mongering articles that feeding raw is akin to poisoning your dog. And at that time, I started, BomBom, even my own family were accusing me and said, you're poisoning our baby, you're poisoning Kyubi. And there's this huge guilt that, I don't want to send him back to that phase where he was sick and weak, and I would never forgive myself if I killed this little pup, through salmonella or E. coli or something like that, which is what we humans associate raw food with.
Right.
But, this is why I said sometimes things happen by luck as well. And I noticed that, call it laziness too, in sous videing his meals, I started to sous vide his meals shorter and shorter, because sous videing requires time.
Right.
And when I was starting to rush, I had to go to work or something. The sous videing time went from 1.5 hours to like half an hour, and I started to realize that, on the days that I sous vide his food less, his poo volume decreased once again. And I actually saw, because I charted his weight growth, his height growth, his fur growth, I started to notice accelerations in his absorption and his progress when I was cooking the food less and less.
I see.
And that in turn led me to ask myself another question. What if he's really a true carnivore and he's not an omnivore like some theories postulate out there? So his diet went looking less like a human-based diet. The lentils went straight out the window, the meat portion went up. I started feeding him more organ meats, which I knew was packed with vitamins. Bones, even though I was nervous as hell about feeding bones, because you see so many, scare stories about people killing their dogs or bones being ingested. And, once again, that was a whole new line of questioning in my mind. Am I killing my dog? Is this right? And it was a very, very long, painful journey, because there's no one there to tell you this is wrong and this is right. And even till today, there's no one tell you it's wrong is right. So when I make a decision whether it's wrong or right, the only way to do it is through thorough research and objective testing. So what I did to prove to myself that actually feeding bones was safe was that I ran an experiment of cooking bones at different temperatures and different controlled time periods. And I saw that the way that the bone matrix of an edible chicken bone would denature the longer you cook it, or the shorter time but at a higher temperature, and you saw how the bone denatured. So I tested it for malleability, I tested it for bone density.
How do you test this?
Moisture.
Like at home?
Yeah, you can test it. It's easy, right? So
you don't need any fancy equipment, just...
I mean, it's not, I mean, yes, I did use some equipment that would not be found in normal homes to measure moisture content.
Because this was before the founding of BomBom.
It was before. I have to say, BomBom was an accident. BomBom was not a deliberate business idea. It happened by accident. And I had no intention of starting a business. I thought that I was ready to start just helping animals. homeless animals. But it wasn't like I'm going to sell my finance company and I'm going to start pet nutrition now.
I see.
It was more, I'm going to, take a back step from finance. I'm going to take life a little bit easier, and I'm going to do something I like, and I'm going to do some charity along the way too. BomBom was the last thing I had on my mind, and in that time,
Never crossed your mind.
no. And I didn't even, the funny thing is, even when I started, preparing food for other pets, I had no name for the company. It was not known as BomBom.
Right.
It was just Kyubi's kitchen,
That's cute.
Yeah. I had no idea. No idea.
All right.
So, there was a huge evolution in Kyubi's diet. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, just like everyone else would.
So it was really Kyubi's positive responsiveness that actually gave you the confidence to continue to experiment.
And what I realized upon meeting other Shiba Inu owners, that we used to have these little Shiba Inu gatherings, and that's how I met Vincent and Dorothy as well. At the end of one of these meetings, a couple of owners came up to me. At the meeting, they had saw Kyubi in his really sickly phase when he was a skinny, runty little pup, and then after 2 months, we met for a reunion at the breeders, and I had a few people come up to me and said, you bought another Shiba Inu. And I was like, no, this is Kyubi. And they looked at him and was like, this can't be. He looks so different.
Yeah.
And his fur was so full. He had a full double coat. He was bulky as hell. He was bigger than some of his older peers. And they were just flabbergasted at his transformation. And I didn't think anything of it, right? I was just happy that he was healthy.
Yeah.
At the end of that day, there was a couple of owners that came up to me and just said, whatever it is that you're feeding Kyubi, can you help us too? We'll pay you for it. And I said, don't worry about it. I just you cover the cost of the raw materials. I'm happy to do it for you. So I started to formulate the same diet for other people as I did for Kyubi, and they themselves started to see miraculous transformations within weeks. But it wasn't as smooth as Kyubi, and that's when I came to the realization that also every dog has slightly different requirements. So when dogs take a lot of organ meats, even though it's a vitamin powerhouse, too much of a good thing can also cause diarrhea.
Okay.
So I discovered the hard way too that, I can't just give other dogs what I gave Kyubi, because age is a factor, breed is a factor, idiosyncratic factors like, pre-existing conditions is a factor, allergies is a factor. So then I started to think to myself, this is impossible.
Yeah, it's very complex.
How can you create, a multivariable feeding model for something that has no precedence and something that has so many variables? So this is where my financial modeling knowledge came in handy, right? So, I spent all my years, everything I do, I put it into numbers, I build a model for it, and I started to build a multivariable model for feeding animals. Like, it took care of portioning, it took care of ratios, formulae, it rethought how the traditional ratios of nutrition was for canine and feline nutrition. So a lot of owners out there, they go by this internet wisdom that if you feed PMR, which is pre-model raw, the ratio that you should feed is 80-10-5-5, which means 80% meat, 10% bone, 5% liver, 5% other secreting organ. And I can tell you that if you follow that, I would say maybe 30% of the dogs and cats out there probably won't make a successful transition. One, because they wouldn't accept that ratio well, and two, owners will probably freak out long before they make that successful transition when they see diarrhea and all that. The first thing they think of is, oh my God, I've given my pet food poisoning. And then they'll just stop the diet and go back to something processed, which is sad. Yeah, so I was feeding, the other pets, and I realized that, there's no one size fits all model. So I think the challenge was to develop a system that could flex for different needs of different pets, and a reliable one. I mean, it got to the point where, I was feeding, 2 or 3 pets, the owners saw humongous improvement in them in whatever ailments they wanted to address, to to tens of pets, to hundreds of pets, and now it's on a huge scale. But I think the key is I never expected BomBom to be a business.
Right.
It was just meant to help pets. It was in line with my dream.
Right.
But I couldn't continue cobbling together a diet in my home. For people, I didn't feel that it was the most hygienic way. I didn't feel that it was the right way to do it. And I think obviously when you're dealing with food in general, whether it's raw or whether it's cooked, you do need proper hygienic practices, proper machinery. Right. And unless you have the proper machinery to deal with it, you can't possibly be dealing with it hygienically.
Right.
So BomBom went from, to moving into a shop house.
Into a shop house, yeah.
Yeah. And then within a few months, we exploded out of the shop house and we went into a big industrial facility.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's been a real journey. It's just, I mean, out of my entire career, I've never seen something that has been so rewarding, and at the same time, it's something that doesn't feel like work, and yet I have never worked so hard in my life.
Wow.
So it's something that doesn't feel like work. I would spend a lot of my own free time. I would just pick up a nutrition book. I would just pick up a peer-reviewed research on genetics or nutrigenomics, or on something very obscure like the effect of feeding fruits on dogs.
Because biology and chemistry and all this science stuff was like your first love, right?
Yeah.
Going
But
back to your
also,
childhood.
when you get into a business of this scale, commodity trading too becomes very relevant, because you are still buying livestock produce and
Yes.
trying to circumnavigate, the risks of buying from bad producers or unreliable producers or people who are trying to price gouge you. At the end of the day, you still have to run a business, and my responsibility to our clients is to make sure that BomBom is a sustainable business. And not only sustainable in terms of economics, but sustainable and reasonable for the owners, but also sustainable ethically. That we don't want to patronize produce or farms that are intensively farming, and husbandry is very dirty or poor. So this is something that I applied my knowledge of farming or commodities and livestock markets to get the best for our pets. And through economies of scale that we have already achieved, we can pretty much offer the best diet for the best prices. Yeah.
Most of these research, in livestock and all that, I'm sure a lot of the commodity trading and all that actually draws a lot of experience in your finance years.
For sure.
But for livestock, nutrition and all that, am I correct? It's really after you've met Kyubi onwards, or it's something that you've been doing reading on your own? Or
actually,
research?
The funny thing is, so one of the ideas that I had that I wanted to do alongside finance, the side thing was to run a restaurant.
Okay.
Because I'm a huge foodie too.
Okay.
And I got very much into the era of molecular gastronomy. Okay. So I started to, once again, read up a lot about foods and the effect of cooking on foods and the different cuts of meat and understanding, fats and proteins and carbohydrate. And, I was already reading about nutrition in general for humans.
I see.
And you can kind of feed off that. You can borrow ideas from that. Even though, of course, cats, dogs, and humans are different species, you need to understand about food. So I feel that, I borrow a little bit from everything. I borrow a lot from, my science-based background, from my financial background, from my love of pets, from casual reading of, food here and there. But I think, my mission, or I feel my responsibility now in life is that, look, there's only one of me in this world. I don't think I'm anything special, but the experience I bring is fairly unique. And I feel that if I don't capitalize on this chance that Kyubi gave me, to help other pets, I don't believe anyone else can do this, in terms of building a multifactorial system to feed a huge number of pets, and also have the scientific backing and the financial backing and the acumen to source good produce, to build or construct hygienic and meaningful nutritious meals. You know, I think, you know, you could be veterinary, you could be a vet, and you could know a dog inside out anatomy wise, but you wouldn't have the nutritional knowledge. You know, you could be a food scientist, but you wouldn't have any idea on how a cat or dog looks like on the inside, or you know, how to interpret poo. You know, so I think there is a lot that I still need to work on, and I feel that in this business, I'm borrowing from everything that I've learned in life, everything. You know, whether it's my work ethic, whether it's the research and analysis that I've put into BomBom to what it is today, or just simply love of animals. But I think simply to say that BomBom was born out of my love of animals, that's very contrived. I think you really have to go all the way in this, you know, and I would caution anyone going to be an entrepreneur just for the sake of making money. I would say don't. You know, I would always say, if you have a business idea, if you think that you can bring something meaningful and valuable to the world, make sure that people will use your product and people will patronize you. You know?
It's very fascinating that you actually bring this up, because I think that, like myself, I'm actually in finance. I'm insurance company based in UK, but now actually they incorporated in Singapore. But for a lot of people, like based on my observations and my own personal experience, there's always the temptation to follow certain herd instincts, right? Certain practices and things like that. I'm sure there are a lot of, like, you know, very ethical practitioners out there, you know, in the finance space and things like that. But there's always this side of things, and you bring this up, which is actually, I think it holds a lot of weight, because you've spent many years in the finance space, and to be able to still stick with that, I think it's just very meaningful to actually hear from you.
Yeah, a lot of people assume that, look, I'm doing BomBom because it's a lucrative business, and I can tell you that I have not taken a cent out of BomBom. And if you were in this business to make money, you would have given up a long time ago. You know, BomBom is 3 years in now. We are, you know, probably Asia's largest raw feeding company. And to think that we achieved that in 3 years is no mean feat, you know, and I'm very proud of what the team has done. I couldn't have done it myself. I have, you know, two very trustworthy and very capable partners, experts in their own rights, in their own fields. You know, BomBom is what I call the triumvirate of, you know, nutritional research, engineering, and technology. And each of my partners represents one of those pillars, as I do too. And I think if you have a business, that's why I say there's a lot of luck too. You have to meet the right people to help you run that business, but also to support you and to believe in your cause. And those two partners started off being one of those people I used to produce for in my kitchen.
Right.
And they said to me, we believe so much in what you do, we want to be part of your journey.
So you first started out BomBom already with them?
No, so they were my customers.
I see.
That asked me to help feed their pets.
I see.
And they just asked me in a casual conversation, can you help? And
so
when
they are
they
also
saw,
Shiba owners?
One of them is, and the other one's a Westie owner.
Right.
And even though the Westie was still in good health and, you know, he comes from good pedigree, the owners still saw tremendous, you know, improvements in his health. He had, you know, chronic, well, not chronic, but quite acute liver failure or damage to some extent. And I think his liver alt enzyme was above 1,000 when the reference benchmark should be below 120-ish for the alt enzyme. And during his time on BomBom, we saw through no medication, through no major medical intervention, just from eating better, liver spots on his abdomen cleared up, and his liver values have now completely normalized.
Right.
You know, so and my other partner who owns a couple of Shibas, you know, his Shibas were balding too. They had the same issue. The immune system issue that Kyubi had.
Yeah.
And just to come back, you know, when I reflect back on Kyubi's condition, all the vets were treating it like a skin issue. And actually, this problem is not a skin issue. It's an immune system issue. And that's the problem with a lot of pets nowadays, that they don't really have skin issues, they have an immune system issue. Yeah, they don't have pancreatitis, they are just fed inappropriately, or genetic-based pancreatitis. So there are a lot of parallels that I can draw with Kyubi's affliction with what other people go through. And every time I met a new customer, a person who came to me with a problem, it just felt that I was reliving Kyubi's journey. And that's why I treat every client like my own dog or my own cat. I know how painful it was to, see your pet day by day deteriorate and no one can help you. So really my goal is just to educate people, make sure that they know exactly what I'm doing, what we're trying to achieve. Like I said, as an entrepreneur, it can be a thankless task sometimes. You got your competitors trying to take you down.
Yeah.
You got people trying to badmouth you. You even got customers who are sometimes ungrateful for the help, or maybe they just don't see things your way. But I have to thank my team. I have to thank, some very long-time clients who believed in what we did. They saw the fruits of what we were trying to achieve. And, that's why I say to entrepreneurs, if you believe in what you do and you are harsh enough on yourself, you're your own best critic, I think that you can succeed. It doesn't matter if you want to be the world's best, gardener, if you want to be the world's best, shipbuilder, or, you can succeed in anything.
How do you balance between being your harshest critic and does this ever come across your mind in terms of over-judging yourself?
I think, I do second guess myself sometimes, but I think if you're objective in your research, even if you do second guess yourself, that second guessing will lead to confirmation that your research was right in the first place. Your initial finding was correct. And that's the thing about being objective, that if you are logical in your follow-through in the way that you assess yourself, it doesn't matter how many times you try to second guess yourself, you will reach the truth, if you're truly objective and you see things through.
You kept mentioning this word, luck, in terms of the founding of BomBom and all that. Hearing your story, you also mentioned Steve Jobs, and one of his most famous quote from him is that you can only, connect the dots backwards,
right,
not forward. Things just fall into place one by one. Like you actually met your partners through your customers, whom you actually experimented food, for their pets and all that. What do you think about luck versus? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that was it because you kept true to yourself of what you were actually passionate about, and that's why you were looking out for these things that naturally fell into place, and it just seemed like luck on the surface?
So I believe in making your own luck sometimes. So obviously, if you are scared of doing things the whole time, like if I had listened to my family initially, like even my own mom said to me, we had 12 dogs when we were young. They're all fed on kibbles, and you see, they all live to 15 years old. Then I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, my mom has a point. But then I thought back, and I said back to her, but Mom, do you remember how each one of them died? I said most of them ended their lives with cancer. That's not normal. And I said, do you remember how they were always stinky? We would shower them once a week in medicated shampoo, and within days they would have a cheesy smell on them. And none of our dogs looked like those dogs like you see in textbooks, beautiful glossy fur, bounding, healthy. I mean, they were active, they were nice dogs, they didn't look diseased by any measure, but were they thriving? I wouldn't say so. And it's funny because parents being parents, they go from being your harshest critic sometimes to then being your biggest supporter. When she saw Kyubi's change, she started telling her friends, and her friends started, typical Asian parents, right?
Cool, yeah.
So I would say that, you make your own luck. If you just got buffeted around by this person telling you this and that person telling you that, and you didn't do your own work, you would be unlucky. You would stay unlucky. Whereas, even after I did my research, I needed to take the courage to do this. I mean, to say that I'm leaving finance, to take a well-paying job, that's all I've been doing all my life. That's all I know how to do.
Exactly.
To earning nothing, and building something pioneering and taking a huge risk that has probably a 95% chance of failure. If you told me that, I would have shat my pants, literally. I would not have done it.
Yeah.
But because I so believed in the research that I did, and I put it to work, and I put it to practice, and I believed in the numbers, and I had all the evidence charted, QB's 4 to 6 times a day, poo went to like once a day. Small poo, instead of huge landmines all over the place. Just little corroboratory, confirmatory evidence like that helps to build your confidence. And if I just stayed at home and I didn't want to help other people, I wouldn't have that luck. I wouldn't, but I think life is about taking risks, and life is also about, taking the opportunities when it gives it to you. And, you have to make failures. I mean, I myself had failures, career failures. I didn't get the jobs that I wanted initially. I made losses in investments too. So, like I said, you have to accept that you will just sometimes lose more than you win, and sometimes you win more than you lose. But you try to reduce the probability of failure by just making sure that you win more than you lose. So look, like I said, even with BomBom, I apply that same logic. There will be customers who say BomBom sucks, that I'm not helping, etc. But if I took that mentality that I'm going to be meeting all these kinds of people, think about all the thousands of pets that I have helped, and they would not have received that care and improvement in their health if we never started this.
Right.
So I think if you get paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by the what ifs, you will never know. I just say try it, and be able to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, I'm going to try up to this point, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, on to the next thing.
I think what you mentioned is very important, because I think most of us, when we feel that we are actually, we have certain interests, or like very deep interests, or most of us would call like passions to actually try something, we are often paralyzed by this thing called fear. And for someone to be in the peak of its career in finance, to be able to take such a humbling experience, to take a step back and go into something, it must have been very, very scary. What do you think?
If you had told me that 10 years ago that this is how I was going to end my finance career, I would be crapping myself. But seeing what I did for Kyubi and seeing how other pet owners went through what I did, I knew that this is my calling. And suddenly I realized, my epiphany, that I had been dishonest to myself my whole life. I had convinced myself that I was a successful person in banking. I had convinced myself that my life revolved around numbers and trying to make money. And I had discovered, the mechanics of how capital markets move. While that interested me, I had forgotten my childhood passion, which was I love animals, and I always wanted to help animals. And I think that was tremendously important. That's why I say, even though it's partially luck, and the rest is like, effort, knowledge, hard work.
I'm sure.
But I feel lucky, because if it wasn't for QB, he wouldn't have highlighted how dire the industry is in terms of misinformation and poor research. There's still a lot of work to be done in the industry, and I hope to be one of the people to shape that in the world, not just in Singapore, but in the world, about how people perceive pet nutrition or pet care in general. BomBom represents the first stepping stone for me in changing how pets live with us. Even if it means that we reduce the number of pets out there, through better breeding, more selective breeding, or more selective ownership. I think it is important to educate people in making the right decisions, whether it's feeding their pets better or just simply saying to them, you're not ready to own a pet yet. Think about it for yourself, before you take that plunge, because that's how pets end up on the street. Girlfriend or boyfriend buy a pet with each other, they break up. The poor pet then, who does he live with? And we've seen cases, where pets get abandoned because of these custody issues, and it's very sad when we have these kind of fallouts and the main victims are the pets who have no voices. So I see that BomBom is serving more of a purpose than just pet nutrition. It's also about, the welfare of another species on this planet.
I think so too.
Yeah, and it's difficult, Every day we face challenges in BomBom, and in any business, like when I read the paper or I read an opinion piece, you could see something that you think is completely unrelated to BomBom. But it is. Everything is related to what you're doing. So for example, people are talking about going green, and there's a huge movement against animal-based diets, going more to plant-based diets. And of course, now I'm seeing, and I was asked to do some consultancy work for an insect-based diet for pets because it's a more sustainable way of feeding pets. And I'm just face-palming myself and thinking this is just more of the same, human motive trying to profiteer from a very low-cost offering that just barely keeps your pet alive, but it's not really how they should be fed, and it's worrying to me, some of the trends that are emerging in the world today, whether it's, life on social media, Instagrammers who, put elaborate, meals in an Instagram picture. It looks beautiful. And then you get a lot of people attempting to make their own raw meals and they follow that and their pets just diarrhea all over the place or, or are fed inappropriately or even in some cases can kill their pets.
Yeah.
That's very worrying for me. I see a lot of worrying trends that BomBom has to go against. But for me, this is life, and this is my life mission. So I think what emboldened me to go ahead with this, even though it holds very little profit motive, is that I think it's for a worthy cause.
Right.
Till the day that Kyubi leaves this planet, God forbid, he'll be a constant reminder to me every day that that it wasn't just him that needed us. And I see my purpose on this earth. I mean, every human being has probably asked himself at some point, what is your purpose? What is the purpose of your life on this planet? Right? I feel that I found my purpose, and that is to leave a legacy for pets. That's my biggest wish, so that even long after I'm buried 6 feet under, pets generations from now will have a feeding model or a safe and protected education, not education, but a framework for owners to feed within. Right now, 70% of owners out there, my estimate, still believe that feeding a processed, homogeneous diet like kibbles or like freeze-dried raw, they call it freeze-dried raw, but it's not really raw, is the right way to go ahead.
Right.
But, we have scientific evidence to prove that it's not.
Why do you think that such research was never around, even before?
It's vested interest.
Okay.
Kibbles was invented in the 1850s, and
is it like more or less like a protected turf?
Yeah, it is. The system is very protected. The industry is very biased and rigged to an extent. When a vet goes through a vet school, or university, who do you think helps to fund the research and provide a lot of the syllabus content for these vets? And the good vets, when they come out of school, the first thing they do is be approached by those pet food companies, out there. And that's why you see, and a lot of vet clinics, they have the hoardings of the pet food brands that have approached them and said, if you sell this product, we will give you some commission, etc. And these diets are not necessarily the best for pets. And it's shocking to believe that in this age of technological progress, the formulation for kibbles hasn't really improved all that much since the 1850s when it was first invented. So 150 plus 170 years ago now, we're into the evolution of kibbles, and it's still not doing major favors for pets. And this is why I said, there's the perversion of human logic, that if we apply the same human logic, like if I told you to eat biscuits that were fortified with vitamins and protein day in and day out,
Right.
you would tell me to go to hell. You would tell me that I'm talking off my rocker, right? If I told you to eat, fish on 2 days and have a nice plate of veg and meat and carbs together, you say, I'll go with that. But suddenly when it comes to feeding our pets, that logic goes out of the window. And like what I always say to my clients, I said, just take a look at your dog. Look at its teeth, right? That's telling you it's a carnivore. They don't have molars like we do, which is for grinding vegetables. Their dentition tells you everything visually that you need to know, even if you're a layman. And the interesting thing is, I was at a customer's house and I asked the family, the father and the mother, and there was this 4-year-old child there. And I asked the family, let me put you in a hypothetical situation. Let's say you're on a family safari in Africa,
Right.
and the safari guide asks you, what do you think this animal eats? How could you tell what the animal eats just by looking at the animal? What visual cues do you get? The mother and the father looked at me. I was like, they thought this is a trick question or is this some complex thing? The 4-year-old just immediately said, teeth. And that's the point. Kids are brutally honest.
Yeah.
Kids are direct. They just tell you as it is. And we lose ourselves in all the complexities of life. And there's so many parallels with what these human beings have gone through with what I've gone through. You just have all your logic diluted with all the different forces. And I think if you are brutally honest with yourself, you will reach the truth. We always had the truth, but when we're kids, but we lose it. So I think if you are passionate and you have a little bit of a thick skin, you can get there. You don't have to be doing pet nutrition, you can be doing anything and you will succeed. So yeah, I just found it interesting that even a 4-year-old can see what the logic in what we're trying to do. Yeah. And it's funny because we see kids of families with dogs, now when they feed BomBom, that's dog food to them. And then when they see kibble, they go, what is that, mommy and daddy, And I remember, and this is how I want to change the face of pet food, right? I remember in the 80s when we had our multitude of pets, there were pet stores selling chocolate droplets for dogs. Now, even you guys as non-pet owners now, I'm sure you know that chocolate is toxic to dogs.
Yes, we've heard of that.
Yeah, even you guys know. But in the 80s, we didn't know. And that was only like 30 years ago, right? So it's pretty shocking that all these recent discoveries, something so basic, is still not entrenched in human logic for pet nutrition. Yeah, it still has a lot of evolution to do, and I hope that BomBom will be at the forefront of shaping that.
Since the recent 5 to 10 years, how do you think that pet ownership has slowly evolved in Singapore or in Asia, and what are you excited about? Like, is it taking more towards a positive direction based on your observation, or what are you excited about in that space?
I would say that the trends in pet ownership or pet nutrition is generally positive. So at least humankind is doing their part to do better for our furry friends. In terms of demographics, for sure, there is an inverse relationship with human fertility rates and pet ownership. So, people who don't have kids or don't want to have kids, or maybe the cost of having kids is too high, but they want to own something together. A pet is a very natural and logical step to take for a lot of couples, and especially in this day and age where property prices are skyrocketing in places like Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore. Having a pet doesn't really take up much space, and it's a companion for a good portion of your life. Gives you some feeling of companionship. So I think, as much as it feels like pets depend on us, we also depend on pets a lot, and because of that doting, dependency that humans have, we also are starting to, we want to do better for our pets. So the encouraging trend that we're seeing is that people are starting to be a little bit more realistic about the budget they have to set aside for keeping their pets healthy. And they're not just thinking, you know what, I'm going to stinge on food and, you know, just hope for the best. Or they're just not going for the most bargain basement food out there. They are actually thinking, what can I do better? You know, or why is this, you know, going wrong with my pet? Like the same journey I had with Kyubi. The encouraging trend is that people are more receptive now, and there's a lot of variety of material, information or otherwise, out there on the different diets available. The bad point is that because there's so much variety and optionality and different views out there and everyone's weighing in on that opinion, everybody's an expert and everybody is got a different idea on how things should be done. I do agree that there is no one set way of feeding a pet. Like I said earlier, diets do need to be tailored for every pet, breed, life stage. But there's just so much marketing propaganda out there by other pet food companies, by, you know, forum admins, by other participants, other pet owners. Everyone's got their own view on what works and what doesn't, right? And sometimes it's correct by accident, or sometimes it's wrong by accident.
Right.
The other trend that I'm seeing is that, you know, is very parallel with humans, is that increasingly all of us, when we go shopping now for food, what's the first thing we do to differentiate whether product A is better than product B? We will flip it around and look at the ingredients.
Right.
And I think the standards of food in general are escalating, is improving in the world. And, you know, just as we would maybe look at ingredients for what goes into baby food now, and we scrutinize it even more closely, we would try to understand that more for pets as well. And on a macro scale of my life, you know, where I said that I think that if you prevail with the truth and you do something honest and, you know, it is generating something of value, good value, you will prevail in the end. And similarly, I see this shift, you know, even in the time that BomBom has existed, you know, I have seen the shift in mindset from people who perceive that, you know, feeding kibbles and all that is the end all and be all for pet nutrition, to now they've started asking the right questions like, actually, no, it's not. What is so good about feeding a biscuit? Or what is so right about feeding processed foods the whole time? So I think it's good that people are questioning things more now, and I think it's signaling a change in the mindset of owners. The trouble is, where are they going to get their answers from?
Yeah,
you know. So our major challenge is, you know, if we didn't get to those owners first, well, then we have to make sure that they find out somehow that our research prevails over others which do not have substantiated research, or regurgitated research, which is just, you know, may not be substantiated.
Right.
You know.
So the logical question to ask for like, based on what you just mentioned, is that for those who are not customers of BomBom, or are not ready to be BomBom customers just yet, but are pet owners themselves, they have a pet dog or pet cat, what would be the first thing that you advise them to do with regards to their pet nutrition?
Well, that's one of the follies of human nature, right? So many pet owners, they would look at their pets and go, I don't need to change their food. There's nothing wrong with them. It's like what my mom said. There's nothing wrong with our dogs. But so human nature is such that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So if your pet isn't vomiting blood or shitting blood, or you know, losing fur or super itchy, or not displaying any, you know, physical symptoms or discomfort, they'll just think, my pet's doing fine. And when they start to deteriorate, they just say, oh, that's a function of age, you know, or that's just the breed, or he's just genetically not well endowed, you know. So there are many excuses that humans can give, but one of the main challenges I see is that if there isn't something visibly wrong with the pet to that owner, they won't make that change, right? But, you know, for me, I have a problem too, that when I go walking in the botanic gardens or I walk, in the parks, or I see a dog, I can see exactly what's wrong with them, whether it's joint deficiency, protein deficiency, vitamin deficiency, and you can tell all these things just by looking at a dog, just like you would. You can look at a human being and tell that they're arthritic, or if they have alopecia, or some sort of skin disease or rash. It's very visible, but humans tend to ignore some of these symptoms. But actually, all the while, our pets are giving us these signals, and we're not picking up on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because if it's, I don't know if you share the same observation as well. Like when it comes to, parents, their own children, they wouldn't say that it's genetic or
they wouldn't.
They would like investigate into the whole nutrition thing.
Yeah, and this is what I say, right? So human logic is perverted when it comes to our pets, or transposing that same logic to our pets, because they're a different species.
Right.
So humans, strangely, they start to feed their pets more like human beings, but yet dogs can't digest our human ratios or nutrients like humans do.
Yeah.
And at the same time, with our own babies, our babies can't talk, just like pets. The first thing that parents do to see if their baby is digesting things well or has allergies is to look at the poo in the diaper. But as we grow up as humans, we stop looking at our own poo as well. And that is really important. And I also learned a lot of things in this field of pet nutrition because I started to change my own diet and started to question my own eating styles and habits. And I saw my own health improve, So I think there was huge benefits for this, but I'm still seeing really warped logic out there. Like, if pet owners, if human beings are looking at their own baby's poo, why are they not looking at their own pet's poo for cues, visual cues on their internal gut health? Like how I did, it's just a simple line of questioning, like, is it normal for my dog to poo 4 to 6 times a day?
Yeah.
And coming back to that misleading information, it's really difficult because when you do Google, puppy pooing a lot, everyone's puppy poos a lot.
Yeah.
But that is not because it's normal. It is because they are feeding their pets inappropriately with this formulated puppy food, which is, it's not very appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. But based on what you say, it's very interesting to actually see that trend, that disconnect between how people treat their own children versus how they actually treat their own pets.
Yeah. Which
is why I think everything just kind of fall into place for both of us as well. Even though we are not pet owners yet, aspiring ones, we have always been so concerned what if we are not ready? Do you think that there will be for a couple or like aspiring pet owners, what advice will you give? What are the cues, or what are the at which point do you think that aspiring pet owners can tell themselves, you are ready to adopt a pet or anything like that?
So I think I'm kind of unconventional too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure everybody has those friends like, oh, have a baby, it'll make your relationship better. I, on the other hand, think that's terrible advice. Unfortunately, I have some very good friends, who always told me, if your own relationship is not stable, don't have a kid, whatever. But I think with the area of pet ownership, it's kind of similar. It's not about, if someone tells you, oh, you'll never be ready to own a pet, that's rubbish, right? You have to understand they're a different species, and you have to understand them before you welcome them into your home. And for example, if a dog pees in the house or poos in the house, is it their fault or is it your fault? And the common reaction for a lot of owners is to beat the dog or the cat, or to punish, negative conditioning, for the pet.
Yeah.
But the pet can't tell what is a toilet and what it's not.
Yeah.
You got to condition it. So actually, we have to think that pets are living in our human world. They don't know that a car can kill, right? But if we let them go off leash and they dash out, they're going to pay the ultimate price, and you will never forgive yourself for it. And it's our responsibility as guardians of these furry species to let them know what is okay and what's not. And that's a lifelong commitment. So my advice to people is, if you're ready to walk your dog or, look after your cat or dog when it's inconvenient to do so, let's say you're rushing for dinner or you've got this really important business meeting, but yet you've got a starving cat or you've got a starving dog who's fussy too, and you've got to dilly-dally, you've got to wash up their dog bowl or cat bowl after feeding them. You have to think about the absolute worst and most inconvenient thing you have to do for that living thing, even when it doesn't suit you, or even like if it's monsoon season and your dog refuses to pee or poo in the house and they will only pee or poo outside, like my fussy Shibas, right? Come rain or shine, you still have to go out. You still have to get drenched. You still have to shower your dogs after that. You still have to dry them, and that's very time consuming. So I think instead of focusing on all the really attractive things about owning a pet, like it's cute, it's cuddly, it's going to provide you with companionship, love, and all that, or a play partner, or like I want my kid to grow up with a pet.
Yes.
All these glorified, attractive ideas about owning a pet. I would ask yourself about all the less convenient and less attractive aspects of owning a pet first. Yeah.
And it's more like, are you willing to
sacrifice?
Yeah, the sacrifices, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Not sure if you're ready, but I feel that we are very lucky to know people like yourself, and I mean, we feel more ready than previously, I guess, because like we know kind of what entails, right?
Yeah.
Of owning the pet.
Look, everyone has a different style of raising their children, different style of raising their pets. I'm not going to tell people how to raise their pets.
Yeah.
And people might even take offense to that. And you see, that's what I love about animals, is that no matter how badly or well you raise them, they will always love you the same, right? They won't resent you. They will just think, my mom and daddy's the best. They'll give you that look, and they will die from cancer, and they will suffer from afflictions, and they will never blame you for 1 minute. They'll just continue loving you the best that they can.
Yeah.
You can scold them 1 minute and they'll still come home and make you, when you come home, they make you feel that home is the best place to be. So that's what I love about animals, and that's why I feel that I need to do something for them now, right? If I don't, yes, there's other animal lovers out there, there's a lot, but can they really make a difference to the world? Maybe to their own pet, yeah. Maybe to a few other pets, yes, but I'm really thinking big, and I think whatever I do in my life, I don't want to do by half measures. And with that, there's always going to be a minority of people who disagree with you and don't like what you're doing, or maybe even be jealous. I don't know. But what matters is that, I'm tremendously happy when I look at my own 2 dogs now, Kyubi and Hanako. They tell me they're happy and healthy, and I can see that, and it's very comforting when you can troubleshoot your own problems. And I'm trying to teach pet owners to do the same and empower them to read these cues and signals for health much better. At the end of the day, pets' lives on Earth is just way too short. Living 10 to 20 years, we want them to go to 20, 30. And based on my idea of longevity, I feel that cats should really be living to 25 and dogs should be living to 20 plus.
Wow.
Yeah. But of course, genetics.
Research,
yeah,
it's possible to do that?
I think so. I think genetics does play a huge part. So you will always have people saying, hey, I fed my dog kibbles my whole life and he lived to 20 plus. So it can't be the food, right? But it's like saying, I was given good genetics, so I'm just going to smoke cigarettes every day. So what's saying that if you didn't feed your dog appropriately or well, or cat well, what's saying that you couldn't have extended their life by another 1 to 2 years? And in their twilight years, their vitality would have been even better. Seeing an animal in its twilight years or even in its twilight days is the most saddening experience, when they can't walk anymore, when they can't run to the door to greet you, when they can't even eat their food properly, or they lose their appetite, and food is such a big deal for pets, it's such a highlight of their day, or they just become incontinent, or they just start messing themselves up with pee and poo. They have their pride and dignity too.
Right.
And having owned many pets, you see that. And it's something that I would want to postpone for as long as possible and for them to go peacefully.
Right.
And not just that, but also, just to give them a fair life. They give us everything. They live for us. Why shouldn't we give them something back?
Makes sense.
And since food is such a big part of their lives, that's the best way you can show them your love. Yeah.
So BomBom has a very long-term end goal, but what is you guys most focused on at this point of time? Is there anything?
Well, BomBom, is a 3-year-old company, and even though we're still growing aggressively, and it's sometimes to the point we can't handle it, and we're hiring more people. I think maintaining quality throughout the expansion is very important. I think also furthering, while keeping an eye on quality and consistency is important, but also you have to think about how to push the frontiers more. So I think, I would love to delve more into R&D. Having a proper full lab. Right now I'm doing a little bit of testing in our facility, on ingredients and coming out with, improved formulations. But I would really like to rope in, more scientists into what we're doing and bring a more academic approach into what we're doing. And also just to bring on board approval from more people in the veterinary industry. And it's sad that, it's quite entrenched in a lot of traditional vets that prescription kibble sometimes is the best way to go, when I just can't see any reason for it. Kibbles, I believe there is a space for kibbles. If your dog has some terrible affliction that prevents it from eating every protein under the sun, and you just need to give it some sustenance, maybe there's a space for that, right? Or if we ever hit World War III, and given how this year started out, you never know. Yeah. But we're not in World War III. We're not in the Great Depression. We're not in World War II or I. And kibble was invented in the 1850s. It saw us through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. It served its purpose. But we're in peacetime. And, when we have a problem with excess livestock, there is so much food wastage. Our pets, when they could be eating better, they're actually eating things that are completely inappropriate for them. It's just misallocation, and this is where the whole economics of the food industry is so wrong. And we, just like, the human green industry, we would push for more ethical farming. We would only support ethical farmers and people who, like us, push the frontiers of food science and the betterment of nutrition or hygiene.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So would you say that, how does your day-to-day life at work looks like right now? Are you spending most of the time doing the research behind the lab? Or?
Okay, well, I've never been a guy who is very structured, right? Okay. My days never look the same. Okay. Right? Day 1 and day 2 will never look the same, even when I was trading or whatever, because you just don't know what news is going to be thrown your way. Yeah. And, with BomBom, we meet different clients every day, right. Difficult or easy or traditional or what.
But your natural habitat, is it doing the research or?
Yeah, I mean, look, the research is ongoing. Yeah. I don't read storybooks or fiction.
Yeah, of course.
I read nutrition. I read papers. I read, and I talk to, people of science. And I do really inane things like, experiment with pieces of meat and whatnot in my book, in my kitchen, or in the facility. It's like I said, it's a passion. I just don't know where it ends and when it stops. When it ends and when it starts, because it's just ongoing for me every day. I live and breathe it now. But what is changing is that I think the business has a need. It's growing. I need to look after, our employees too. I also need to make sure that our clients are getting the care that they need. So the problem with a growing clientele is that you might neglect some of your clients who are, in the background. They're doing okay, but they might start to feel neglected, and I feel that I don't want to lose touch of that. I feel that I can't say that BomBom is a successful business, right? I don't think I could ever say as a successful business, whether it's $1 billion business or not. You never stop repainting that bridge, like I said. But I think that you need to keep. It's important not to be complacent. and you need to ask yourself, what can you do better in which area? And trust me, there will always be complaints. But when people complain about something, you should take it as important feedback on what could I do better. And if there's a trend on, a cluster of the same kind of complaint, then you know there's something I have to change with the business. And trust me, there will always be that. So you always have to evolve the business. And even when things are, peachy and all customers are happy, which is very rare, you have to ask yourself, what can I do better? What's the next step? And there's always something. It's like playing whack-a-mole. If it's not dealing with clients, it's about, progressing or advancing our formulae or having more product offerings out there. And when you offer more products, how are you going to procure that? You want to work with the best suppliers. There's always going to be something. Yeah. Always going to be something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's the end of the, more serious thought questions round. We are going to our usual rapid fire-ish questions. I say rapid fire-ish because sometimes I get a bit too carried away and I'm just very curious. I would like to actually usually let my guests elaborate a little bit more.
Okay.
So, first question I have is, when did your love for Shiba Inu start?
I think even before I owned a Shiba Inu. They're so full of character. I mean, it's hard not to love that face.
Okay.
They have a natural smiling face. They're so cheeky. But, for me, they're a nice size of dog. They're not too overwhelmingly big, and they're not really too tiny that I could accidentally step on them. But I think most importantly, they're really full of character. Yeah, probably, I wasn't too aware of the breed until like maybe 2 years before I had Kyubi.
So when you went to the breeder, you mentioned that your wife and I were not deciding to have a puppy that day, to go home with a puppy that day, but you already knew that there was a Shiba there.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were...
Yeah, it was a Shiba breeder.
Okay.
So we had already done our research on what kind of dogs, we liked, but we had no idea that day would change our lives forever.
Would you have considered Akita Inu if it wasn't banned in Singapore?
Absolutely. Although I prefer the look of a Shiba.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, someone who I met along my, dog food journey, Caesar Milan, when we met recently as well, he told me a lot of people, they end up getting dogs that do not match their energy level.
Oh.
So I would say to people in your earlier question, like, are you ready to get a pet? Also, the type of pet you get is very important. And I think Shibas match my energy level perfectly. I've had people say that Kyubi even smiles like me or behaves like me. He is like a doggy manifestation of me. So as much as they imprint on us, we also imprint on them, and vice versa. I think you have to get one that matches your energy level. And I feel that me being a moderate energy level person, if I got a big dog, can I really afford the energy to be walking them as often as they need to, exercise and whatnot? So for me, the Shiba Inu is perfect in terms of size, lifestyle. They're lazy little bastards as well. Don't like to wake up early. So it's great. I mean, and they're so cheeky.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. That reminds me. What do you think about Mame-Shiba? Your observations.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Mame-Shibas are basically just small Shibas. And they're small Shibas bred with other small Shibas to produce even smaller Shibas.
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking is because we have very little knowledge in this.
Yeah.
We obviously liked the size.
Yes.
We love the idea of having them, but we're not sure whether they are ethical breed.
Well, I mean, you can get healthy Mame-Shibas, but at the same time, it depends what was bred with another to get where they are today, right? So obviously, to get a Mame-Shiba, the prerogative is to have small size, and obviously, if you breed two small sized dogs, it's very likely that one of them was the runt of the litter, and the runts usually have worse health than the other dogs. So if you keep perpetuating that kind of breeding, health is probably not going to be one of the dog's strong points. But of course, with very judicious breeding, as with any breed, you can get healthy Mame-Shibas too.
Have you dealt with any Mame-Shibas in Singapore?
Yeah, we have a couple on our roster.
Okay.
And I've seen a few myself, but I just want to differentiate that you can get a small Shiba, and they're not. They will be thought to be. They look like a Mame-Shiba, but it's actually just a small standard size Shiba.
Oh, okay.
And I believe those are better than true Mame-Shibas that are like Chihuahua size. They literally are like 3-4 kilo Shibas, whereas a normal male Shiba would be anywhere between 10 to 12 kilos ish. A female Shiba would be, between 8 to 10 kilos. So you can see like how much smaller. But you can get somewhere in between, like just a small standard Shiba, like it's just they're just smaller slightly, but not because of deliberate breeding. They'll be maybe 6 kilos kind of size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question. Before Kyubi and Hanako were named Kyubi and Hanako, what were the names you were considering?
Well, Kyubi was...
So for context, Kyubi, based on what Vincent told me, Kyubi actually meant a nine-tailed fox.
That's right.
From Naruto, right?
Yeah. So I was a huge anime fan, a huge Naruto fan.
Yeah.
I've watched it for like 10, 15 years of my life.
Okay.
And, when you get a Shiba, the first thing that comes to your mind is, this thing looks like a little fox, right?
Yes.
So you think, what is fox? And you don't want to call it kitsune, which means fox in Japanese. It's very generic.
Yeah.
But I liked the reference to Kyubi because Kyubi in the cartoons he was a strong character, yet he was very cheeky.
Okay.
And it has parallels with Wu Lei Jing as well, in Chinese belief. So either way, there's a lot of cheekiness in that. And when I first met Kyubi, he was certainly he exuded that cheekiness to him.
Small chili party.
He wasn't that much of a chili party. Yeah, I mean, all Shibas are a little bit chili party, to be honest. But yeah, I like Kyubi because, first of all, I like unique names. I don't want to call him Spot or Patches or like Furball or Cuddles or whatever.
What were some of the names that you recall that you were considering?
With Kyubi, I think I always wanted to have a beagle, actually, a beagle called Bagel and a cat called Tofu for some reason.
Tofu?
For some reason, I don't know. I want to get a cat and dog together, but to be honest, we drew a blank when it came to Kyubi. So before he came back and we saw him a few times at the breeders, we just didn't know what to call him. We're just like, he didn't have a name. So Kyubi really didn't have a name, right? Hanako, we went through many iterations of names because we wanted to be consistent with the Naruto theme.
Okay.
But we thought it would be really contrived if we called her Hinata or like Sakura or something like that. And, we were like, we want to have a name that is, not more than 2 syllables, which is dumb because we end up with Hanako, which is 3 syllables. Yes. Because in my opinion, or from what I understand, dogs don't understand long names very well. They only hear the last part of their name.
Right.
So I like Kyubi because it sounds a bit like QT, Kyubi, I like that.
Yeah.
With Hanako, I was really stuck because we got her when she was older already, and at the breeder, her name was Hanako. So I didn't want to change her name because she may not understand, being called something else. And it was either going to be a name that reflected the way she looked. So her fur was actually a lot lighter than other Shibas, whether it was because of nutritional deficiency or genetics.
Right.
So I wanted to name something along the lines of Sunshine or something like that, but I couldn't find a Japanese name that was appropriate. And I felt it had to be Japanese to be consistent with Kyubi, right? You can't name, Kyubi and then your female dog Dolores. It just wouldn't sound right or consistent. Right. So it had to be consistent. But
makes sense.
Eventually, we just ran out of names that we could call Hanako, and we just said, it just stuck, and she responded to it. So it's like, okay, Hanako is
amazing.
Yeah. That's it.
All right. Next question. Morning walks and evening walks. Which do you enjoy more?
I'll be very honest. I'm a lazy git. Okay, so initially the walking was my favorite. So thank God Michelle, my wife, helped me out with that. But now we take turns. So we take responsibilities, walking. But I'm used to doing the morning walk anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we take turns depending on each other's schedules.
That's cool. What do they do that make you melt the most?
Every time I come home is the airplane ears. So Shibas have this trademark airplane ears, and they squint their eyes really small and they give this huge grin, and they always present you with a gift as well, and they'll run around with their onion ring tails wagging back and forth. It's just the most comical thing you've ever seen. But
what do they usually bring to you?
Usually they're toys.
Yeah.
They will die go and find one of their toys to bring to you, and the bigger the toy, the better. And we have this joke that Kyubi has favoritism because he brings me the biggest toys or whatever, and everyone else gets small toys. But the other heart-melting thing they do is that actually their vocabulary is surprisingly good. Because Kyubi has been with me since he was young, he has picked up a lot of words that I use. So he knows people's names around the house, and he knows other pet names of his friends, etc.
Wow.
So when we say other dogs' names, he would look up and then he would go to the door expecting to see them at the door.
Oh.
Or if I say shower time, the little wretch would run up to my shower and just sit in the shower to hog it, to prevent me from going in, and he wants to play with water.
So he enjoys showering.
Yeah, and he can differentiate between what is a toy, what is a frisbee, and what is a ball. And I never taught him, he just picked it up himself.
So cool.
It's really shocking, and also both our dogs speak to us. Shibas are notorious for their Shiba scream when they are under duress. But a lot of people don't realize that Shibas are very vocal creatures, and they actually talk to you a lot too. And we accidentally discovered it when we whistled to Kyubi and he howled back to us like a wolf. And not a cacophony, but a very melodic howl, very controlled howl. And if we do a soft whistle, short one, he'll do a short, soft howl. And if you do a loud, long held note, he will also hold the same note. It's crazy. I mean,
so cool.
So yeah, with dogs, I believe, or cats, the more time you spend with your pet, the more you get to know them, the more they get to know you, and the more you have better interactions. Yeah, any pet really. I mean, yeah, the more love you give, the more love you get.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit that your two lovely Shiba Inus actually take a little bit of your personality.
Yep, unfortunately for them.
So a lot of people actually say that the pet owners actually take the personality of the dogs, or the dogs take the personality of the pet owners. Which one do you think you are more of? They take your personality of yours?
Yeah, Kyubi has definitely imprinted on me.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. For better or for worse. Yeah. I mean, he really revolves his life around me, and he has been conditioned to, do a lot of things, not by my design, but, of his own volition, to do things that I do. He knows my habits. So he'll sit with me when I finish my meal. After I put the dishes in the sink, whatever, he would know that's time to get up, and he'll go up. Or the minute that I switch off the bedroom lights at night, he would just immediately go to bed and sleep. So they know cues, they would revolve around your lifestyle very much.
How did that change when Hanako was introduced to the family?
Well, Hanako was brought in because I started to feel guilty that Kyubi is still a dog at the end of the day, and he needs to have dog-like interaction too. And Shibas, being very pack-oriented dogs, do enjoy the company of their own kind too. So that's when my quest for Hanako came, and I searched far and wide, and I found a very, very good, reputable, and ethical breeder in Japan. Lovely space. He had a big countryside space, and the dogs ran free. They were never in cages. And when I first met Hanako, she had that same kind of independent character as Kyubi. She would be the one playing by herself, away from the pack. She was much calmer. She was submissive, so I knew that if she came in, there wouldn't be a clash of characters. And true enough, when she came home the first time, Kyubi just took her under his wing. She was so shy and timid, she didn't even want to sleep on the beds. She didn't even want to play with his toys. She always ate like a beast though, so there was no compromise in that. But it was really heartening to see that Kyubi would cajole her into playing and cajole her to coming up to the bed. And he really started to make her his wifey kind of thing. But at the same time,
Very
undesirable.
possessive.
Yeah, the undesirable trait came about. He became very protective of her, and he started to display some aggression to other dogs and other humans too, actually, strangers that he's not familiar with. So it's something we're working with one of our trainers, one of Caesar's trainers actually in Singapore, and it's getting good results. But like I said, it's a lifelong commitment, to live with a pet. Their behavior is never going to be 100%.
Right.
And any owner that thinks that their dog is perfect and has no issues, well, they're bluffing you. Yeah.
Okay. So even though you actually mentioned, we actually laughed about it just now, but I just want for this podcast. So I hear that many of your clients call you the Dogfather.
Right.
Let's start and explain yourself.
Well, I didn't come up with
The
it. but-
Dogfather. That's like the best line.
Yeah, so we started off feeding quite a lot of Shibas, and being part of the Shiba group, the word got around that there was this guy who was very in touch with what their pets needed. And when I started BomBom, I would go and visit every single one of our clients.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I visited some of these clients, the dogs would always do something very unique that their owners had never seen before. So the owners were like, he must be trying to communicate with you or talk to you. And I had dogs, start howling, trying to communicate with me. There were dogs that started peeing on me. This happened many times. So I became their property. There were many dogs that, who were very particular or, didn't like strangers, but they were okay with me. And I think that is due to my upbringing. I knew how to approach dogs. I didn't intrude on their space, and I was respectful of them and their owners. And I think owners felt comfortable with that. And because of what I did for their pets, and I guess they saw how passionate I was about, the welfare of their pets. One client said one day, you are like the Dogfather, and it became a joke inside our chat room. And
because I just imagine like a poster of you in the middle, and then you're surrounded by the dogs, holding,
so
like the Godfather movie poster.
something like that. I actually have a T-shirt that is just like that, but
That says the Dogfather?
yes,
It's
one
amazing.
of clients bought it for me.
You have to show me one day.
Yeah. So it's quite funny. It's modeled after the Godfather, with the puppet thing. But at the end of the puppet strings is a Shiba. So that's what I love about it.
Nice.
It was very apt. And it's funny. At first, I thought it was a little bit not insulting, but I thought it was like, what? It's like you just say what, but I wore it proudly like a badge.
Yeah. It's nice.
I jokingly tell to everyone that my career has gone to the dogs now, and I'm very proud of that.
It's cool. So, so just like parents with children, although they always say that they love all their children,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a favorite too.
Don't make me do this.
Kyubi.
Yeah, he is.
Hanako.
He is. So I always say that Kyubi is my boy, but
Okay.
Hanako was for Kyubi. So
Sweet.
But in terms of love, I love them equally. I mean, Hanako has a lot of good traits.
Yeah.
Home would not be the same without Hanako. Kyubi would not be the same without Hanako. So she's a very integral part of our lives, and I love her to bits. She is so sweet, and I honestly don't think that would be another dog that could fit into our lives as neatly as she had. And no favoritism. They both get fed the same good stuff.
Right.
They both get the same love. But of course, Kyubi has a special place because he's the one who really changed everything for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the rapid fire-ish questions. The last part, I just want to actually, leave the stage to you. More of like, is there any parting shots, food for thought that you want to actually leave the audience with?
Yeah, and I think as pet owners or prospective pet owners out there, I think the one key thing is I want to remind people is that your pets don't have a voice, and you are their guardians. So if you do make any decisions for your pets, make sure it's well researched. Don't just take someone else's word for it. Speak to professionals, question the professionals, question yourself, and ask, does it make sense what you're doing? You know, at the end of the day, this is a living creature and it depends wholly on your decision making. You know, and a single decision can either save a pet's life or it can make it worse. So, yeah, don't be flippant about that, and don't be under the illusion that if you feed cheaper, you're gonna be, allocating a smaller budget to your pet, because there are no shortcuts to this. If you do feed inferior or species inappropriate items, there's no shortcuts. Your pet will deteriorate in health, and you'll end up paying larger vet bills for it anyway, eventually, in some shape or form. Or the worst cost of all is a shorter life. So, for me, don't take shortcuts in nutrition, and think logically.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for any of them who actually want to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so we have an open door policy. Even though I'm the owner of BomBom, people have access to me. I'm still the nutritionist for BomBom.
Right.
Certified nutritionist.
Right.
We do work with vets around Singapore as well. When they have problems that they can't solve, they come to us. And we work very closely with the vets. So it's not saying it's us versus the vets. We work alongside the vets to get the best results for owners. And if people want to find us, our website is www.bombom.com. Silly name, people are not going to forget.
Yes.
Bombom.com. And we have a chat function there 24/7 that serves our customers, serves all our prospective clients. If they have any questions about their pets, ailments, or nutrition that needs answering, we're always there. Our team is very committed to that.
Right. And for those of you who are curious about Kyubi and Hanako photos and videos, the Instagram account is...
Yeah. Currently, right now, before we change the handle, if there's a need to change the handle, it's Kyubi, Kyubi, 333 family.
Yeah, so it's 333 family, right?
Yeah.
So it's Kyubi 333 family.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a very long name.
I know. Well, before Hanako came along, it was just Kyubi 333. Now it's like family to be correct.
That's cool. So thank you so much, Jason. It was a really, really lovely conversation with you on this podcast. I think it was very valuable, and there were actually some tough questions, and I know probably a lot of them are all over the place, but because I just think it was actually very valuable, and I think a lot of our audience will actually get a lot of value out of it as well. Both the perspective of the, as being a pet owner, or even like trying to figure themselves out, doing what they love and how to actually make that sustainable for the long run. So thank you so much, Jason.
Very welcome.
It was a very lovely podcast with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. See you guys in the next podcast. Bye bye.